Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Theo, and I love to talk about horror movies. And in today's episode, I'm going to be talking about my top 5 Stephen King movies. So it's no news to anybody that the newest movie that came out from Stephen King adaptation is called The Monkey, and it just released in theaters last week. It's getting pretty decent ratings. I haven't seen it yet. I do plan to see it pretty soon. But I thought it'd be cool to cover my top 5 Stephen King movies just because of this release. Now, with that being said, I am a massive Stephen King fan. I love a lot of his novels as well as I love a lot of his movies. A lot of the novels that have been adapted into movies have been pretty damn good, in my opinion. Now, I do think there is something to be said about Stephen King's novels and his movies to where they make you feel on a nostalgic base of a certain level. And I say that because whenever I watch a Stephen King movie or whenever I get into reading one of his novels, it makes me feel younger than I currently am. And that goes a long way. For somebody who has written and had movies adapted of over 50 plus novels that have all been at number one in some way, shape, or form on the author's list. A lot of his books, whenever I read them, it takes me back to like my middle school, high school days whenever I first found Stephen King, whenever I first started reading his novels, whenever I watch his movies that have been adapted, like It or The Shining. It takes me back to the nostalgic feelings I had whenever I first started watching those movies back in the 90s and mid-2000s. I've always gone on this joking rant about how I am 33 years old with the spine of a 65-year-old. And I know some of you are going to say, like, oh, that's not old, but believe me, my spine will tell you differently. But with all that being said, let's jump into my top 5 Stephen King movies. At number 5 on this list, I'm putting It. It's probably part 1 for both either the TV series from the 90s or the newest adaptations from Andy Muschietti. I like both part 1s of It. I don't necessarily care for part 2 on either side of which you look. I think with the TV series from the 90s, I think that the part 2 was portrayed better. Maybe it's just, again, nostalgia. I don't know. But for me, the part 2 from Andy Muschietti has been too CGI'd, I guess. It followed the novel better, in my opinion. But it has too many moments of where they're trying to mix physical effects with CGI effects, and it just doesn't really work with me. I feel like I'm watching like a computer-generated game at times rather than watching a horror movie. I absolutely love part 1 for It for both. I think it gives me a sense of my childhood back in the day whenever I would be outside playing and you get that gang of friends together and you're out, doing things you probably shouldn't be doing, or you're out having fun with your friends, getting into like adventures of whatever. It gives me that feeling whenever I watch both movies. I think the 90s version of the TV series for me is probably better, in my opinion. I don't discredit anything about the part 1 for the remake. I think both hold their ground very well, and I said that whenever I reviewed it, during my Halloween season this year. Number 4 on my list of Stephen King movies is Dr. Sleep. I love Dr. Sleep. And I went into it completely blind because I never read the novel. I bought the novel, did not have time to read the damn novel, which really upsets me. I want to go back and read it because I loved reading The Shining back whenever I was, in my teens and going into college. Loved it. Absolutely loved reading The Shining. I did not get the opportunity to read Dr. Sleep. I love the movie adaptation, though. Now, what I will say about Dr. Sleep is I don't feel like it got the pop that it deserves. For it being a direct sequel to The Shining made, 30 some odd years later, I feel like there should have been more of a splash in the industry for it. Not a lot of people knew about it until it kind of got released on like streaming services. It was known that it was coming out, but like like I said, like you feel like for The Shining being as big of an inspiration to horror fans and to horror in general, that it would have made such a much bigger impact than it did whenever it came out. And in no way, shape, or form am I discrediting the movie by saying that, because it's a fucking damn good movie. Ian McGregor plays, he's fucking fantastic in this movie. There are so many key points that I have heard touch base to the novel of Dr. Sleep very well. The concept of it really is that, Ian McGregor plays Danny Torrance, who is now living his life as a grown Danny Torrance, who experiences The Shining still and seeing these premonitions, but then meets this girl who can also do that. And it carries on from there. There's a lot of really good moments in this horror movie that I still think about every time I go through my movie list. I will say this about Dr. Sleep. I know it is supposed to be like a direct sequel to the Shining novel, and it's supposed to be a direct sequel to Stanley Kubrick's film from the 80s, but it really does well whenever it's touching base on those moments from Stanley Kubrick's film, as well as holding its own as a sequel. And that goes a long way, because Stephen King famously, everybody knows this, fucking hated the Shining movie that Stanley Kubrick directed. And he really enjoys this one. And following Dr. Sleep at number 3, I have The Shining. The Shining is such an important piece of horror history. It has so many moments, even though it's widely disliked from Stephen King, famously disliked from Stephen King, Stanley Kubrick dropped his footprint on horror with The Shining and the way that he directed it. And we all know these moments of nostalgia. There's the blood through the hallway that comes out of the elevator. There's the twins, the here's Johnny, the all work and no play, the staircase scene. Like, we all know, all of our horror fans, we know these scenes and how legendary that they are, as well as that the writing for the script and the story itself, it's just a simple story. It's a haunted house story, or a haunted house hotel story, that got transformed into such a marvelous piece of film. There's so many nostalgic moments in The Shining that have become legendary, parodied, or raritied moments throughout all of filming history. Whether it be horror, mystery, thriller, true crime, there's tons of moments that get referenced from The Shining that do not get referenced from any other movie. And also, I mentioned this one during my 13 Nights of Halloween this year also. It's one of the movies I put on every year during the Halloween season. I'll turn this movie on anytime and sit down and watch it. I can watch The Shining over and over and over again and never get sick of it. Coming in number 2 for me is going to be the original Pet Sematary. And I know that this one is not widely liked by a lot of people. Should The Shining probably be higher on a lot of people's lists than Pet Sematary? Probably. But for me, this was one of the first horror movies I remember watching. And it scarred the shit out of me as a kid. There are so many scenes, again, in this movie that just give you a nostalgic feeling. For me, anyway, it does. Whenever I'm watching this movie, it takes me back to whenever I was probably like 7-ish, 6, 7 years old. And that's whenever I first seen this movie. Gave me fucking nightmares. And it haunted my dreams for many, many years to follow. And now as I look back as an adult and I think about the concept of the movie and the plot-driven narrative of it, I start to think, like, as a father, the concept of losing a kid that you love dearly, that's haunting enough. As having a deep down feeling of fatherhood, to even think of the horrors of what would follow your life if you lost one of your kids, how much it would impact you as a human being, would you be willing to essentially play God to try and bring them back? Or would you let their soul rest and let them do what they need to do in the afterlife? Would you want them to come back knowing that they may not be the same person that you put in the ground? Knowing that they might try to do something to you and your family? Or would you let ill be and let rest soul? The scenes that haunted my nightmares the most about Pet Sematary, I remember Zelda, which again, you know, hey, awesomeness, right? Got it tattooed on my body, favorite video game. But I remember as a child sitting in my grandmother's living room in the dark one night and turning this movie on and, you know, seeing that disfigured Zelda in the bedroom against the wall and sputtering the nonsense that they're sputtering, and, you know, the Rachel, Rachel moments like that, they've just infected my horror-driven brain. I remember the little boy coming back for the first time and slashing the Achilles heel. There's a ton of just haunting moments throughout Pet Sematary that will sit with me probably the rest of my life. And with that being said, you know, I know this movie is semi-dated. A lot of people say it's semi-dated. For me, I think it carries a like VHS quality along the years that makes you feel like it's got that dark and eerie presence of just, you know, the 80s, 90s, throwing a VHS tape in at night, hearing the sound effects of the VCR, and sitting in a dark room, waiting, just waiting for the glooming and haunting chills to come down your spine, wondering if somebody's behind you as a child while you're trying to figure out what the hell's going on screen. That's what Pet Sematary has done and continues to do to me every time I watch it. And finally, coming in at number 1 for me, Misery. Misery is one of those films that I seen probably later into my teens. I didn't see it as a kid. But the concept of it is essentially what we do in our reality-driven based entertainment cycle now. The concept of Misery is that a giant fan of an author, after he wrecks, finds him in a snowstorm, helps him out and brings him back to life, and asks him, hey, why are you writing a novel? Are you writing Misery? I'm a big fan of yours. And essentially, yes, he has, and she gets the book and she reads it and realizes like he just doesn't want to do it anymore. He's killing her off and he wants to move forward with his career, and she doesn't want that. And that drives her a bit fucking insane. This is one of those movies that has a very simple concept like that, where it gets the degree of fandom that it does in horror because of the outstanding performance from Kathy Bates. Kathy Bates is a phenomenal actress. Love Kathy Bates. She is one of my favorite actresses, probably in my top 5 of all time. I love everything that she has done. Even the non-horror stuff that she's done is fantastic. And, you know, I say that because obviously I'm a giant horror nerd. But even the horror concepts like Misery, American Horror Story, stuff like that, she kills it in anything that she has ever starred in. Kathy Bates playing Annie Wilkes, one of the most insane and psychotic, but most memorable and fantastic performances in horror I have ever fucking seen. She plays this weird personality of being able to go from this super fan who's just nice, kind, completely in love with this author, to flip that switch like that and immediately turn into this psychopathic, I can't believe you're fucking doing this. Why are you doing this to this character? I love this character. You're not going to do this. I'm going to fucking hurt you because you're doing this type of role. And she does that on the turn of a dime. Kathy Bates had the ability, probably still does have the ability, to turn that personality trait instantly. Going from a nice southern, nice to meet you, what can I do for you, to instantaneously, oh, you got the wrong paper. I can't believe you got the wrong paper. I'm going to break your fucking ankles because you got the wrong paper. Her eyes popping out of her head and, their facial expressions, just, and then just immediately the next scene, she's like, okay, I hope you learned your lesson through all this, and I hope we can move forward. Even talking about the movie right now makes me want to go fucking watch it. I think I might go fucking watch it because I absolutely love this movie. I love everything about Misery. I think it will honestly continue to go down as my favorite Stephen King movie. I should probably read the book for that one too. I haven't read Misery. You think by now I would have, but maybe I'll look that up and read that. Seems like a good idea. All right, everybody, that'll do it for this one for me. That is my top 5 Stephen King movie adaptations. I hope you all enjoy this video. I appreciate everything you guys do for the channel. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and check under your beds, and stay safe out there.